Rusky Ed here with another lesson on verbs. We'll get to the verbs after the intro song, but in the meantime, take a look at the focus words for this lesson.
Rusky Ed is his name, and speaking Russian is his game. If it is Russian you would like to know, then Rusky Ed is the place to go.
Russian verbs are complicated creatures, and in this lesson, we'll continue on from where we left off in the last lesson. Obviously, in 2 short lessons, we won't cover all there is to know about Russian verbs. But enough chitter chatter. Let's get on with the lesson. The first topic to be covered in this lesson is imperative verbs. And imperative verbs are basically the kind of verbs that are used when you're telling someone to do something. Bossy people use imperative verbs a lot, but you don't have to be bossy to use them. For instance, if someone enters your warm house on a cold day, you might say, Sнимите, ваше пальто, which means take your coat off. Alternately, you might just say, раздевайтесь, which is the imperative form of раздеваться, which means to undress. Of course, all you are suggesting is that they take off their coat and not get carried away and undress completely. Similarly, you might use the imperative form of ждать, which means to wait, in order to request that someone wait for you. In fact, подождите меня means wait for me. Moving along, our next topic is participles. Basically, a participle is a special form of a verb which is used in a sentence when it is not being used as the main verb in a sentence. For instance, использование means to use, and we see a conjugated form of this participle in the following sample sentences. Использованная мальчиком лопата была сломанной, and лопата использованная мальчиком была сломанной, both of which mean the shovel used by the boy was broken. In order to keep this lesson from getting too long, let's proceed now to verbs of motion. The words hadit, iti, and paiti mean to go on foot. Note that there are 3 forms of this verb. You can see that iti is used in a non-literal manner in the following sentence. Идет снег с дождем. It means it is snowing and raining. Ехать is another example of a Russian verb of motion, and ехать means to drive. Of course, slapping different prefixes on in front of the verb can alter the meaning of the verb somewhat. For instance, мы проехали под мостом means we have driven under the bridge, as in we've driven under the bridge and kept on going. However, мы заехали под мост also means we have driven under the bridge, but in this case, we've driven under the bridge and stayed there. Next up are давай and давайте, which are imperative forms of давать, which means to give, but which have special significance since they are often used when suggesting some action. For instance, давайте не будем говорить об этом means let's not talk about it. Finally, let's take a quick look at reflexive verbs, as in мы не всегда соглашаемся, which means we don't always agree. Here we see a reflexive form of соглашаться, which means to agree. Similarly, in она посмотрелась в зеркало and она смотрелась в зеркало, which both mean she looked at herself in the mirror, we see a form of посмотреть, which means to look. The thing to keep in mind is that reflexive verbs indicate that someone is doing something to himself, herself, itself, or themselves. The focus words for this lesson include использование means to use, идти means to go on foot, давать means to give, соглашаться means to agree, and посмотреть means to look. This lesson has come to its conclusion, and so it is now time for Rusky Ed to sign off. До свидания!